2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And it's not. What if you heard good?
They're getting my, they're getting. Okay, just around. Madam Mayor.
Looking for candy? What's going on here? I told the same.
Oh, I see, Jay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Aaron Ford, your Attorney General, and I'm delighted to be joined by so many of our colleagues. This is a true representation of the approach that we have taken as a state to address a very important issue in our state. That's the opioid epidemic. I'm proud to be joined by Reno Mayor Hillary Sheevey, Reno City Council Member Naomi Dewar, Reno City Council Member Devin Reese, Washoe County Manager Eric Brown, Washoe County Commissioner Von Hartung, and the Washoe County DA Representative Michael Large, as well as a representative from the Health and Human Services Department of our state, Don Yohe. I am going to present the mic to them as they see fit during the course of this conversation, but I just wanted to acknowledge them at the outset because, again, this is a statewide issue. We are addressing this as frequently as we can, talking about the impact that this has as a state, but also as regions. On June 17th, 2019, a few short months after I became your Attorney General, I stood right here in this very room and I announced that my office filed an expanded complaint against multiple opioid defendants to hold them accountable for the harms, risks, and impacts that the opioid crisis has had on Nevada and its residents. At that time, I reaffirmed one of my core goals while in office, and that's to seek justice by holding those who created this opioid epidemic responsible. The opioid epidemic has killed thousands of Nevadans, including elderly, vulnerable people and children, and it's devastated the state's healthcare and our public safety systems. This is not a faraway problem. This is not something that's happening over there. It's happening right here in the Silver State. In fact, Nevada has been uniquely impacted by the opioid crisis. It has been and continues to be one of the hardest hit states. Tragically, current data now shows that the opioid-related deaths in our state have skyrocketed, have spiked to levels even higher than they were during the height of the original epidemic. In 2020, Nevada saw a 40% increase in opioid-related overdoses, opioid-related overdose deaths, for a total of 484. That's the highest single-year death number on record for opioid-related deaths here in our home state. But we're fighting back. We're working hard to bring the tools into the state that will allow us to help those in need and to protect the entire Nevada family. Today, I stand here again pleased to announce that we have won pivotal battles that will now bring in much needed money to the state of Nevada, along with all of its counties and municipalities and litigating cities. That's so that we can begin building and executing on a comprehensive statewide remediation of this devastating epidemic. Earlier this year, as you may recall, I announced that this office had entered into 3 settlements that will bring in a total of approximately $329 million that will be dedicated to remediating the opioid epidemic. By the end of April, and very soon into this week, Nevada will have received and begin receiving approximately $50.7 million in funding, which will be dedicated to opioid relief. And that's why we're here. We're here to talk about the influx of that money and how we're going to be able to immediately begin to impact this issue. The money that I'm talking about, the 329 that I mentioned, is coming from 3 different sources. The first of which is a $45 million settlement that we received last year from McKinsey & Company. And just a little bit of background about that settlement, just to remind you. I announced that settlement after colleagues from all 49 other states who have attorneys general and the 5 territories in the District of Columbia, every single one of them entered into a global settlement with McKinsey & Company. I stood alone against my colleagues and against great pressure, as you might imagine, and not agreeing to that settlement. And I did so because under that settlement, the allocation that Nevada would have received was around $7 million. And I couldn't come and look the mayor, the commissioner, our colleagues, and our citizenry in this state in the face and say that I brought you $7 million of a $500 million. And so we went it alone, and we ended up settling ourselves for $45 million. And that's the key, because we understand here in our state that our job is to look out for Nevada citizens and Nevada residents and to ensure that we can do the best we can to address this issue. And as a result, companies like Purdue Pharma will be held responsible in addition to this. And that's where the second source of money is coming from. And it's a settlement that's going to be coming out of the bankruptcy that Purdue has. And I will turn back to that in a second. But before I do, there's a $26 billion settlement that I announced earlier this year from the three largest opioid distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson, which will see $231,679,409 coming into our state. The third source, or a different source, is from a settlement that we received with Johnson & Johnson, and that's in the amount of $53 million approximately. The important thing to note about these settlements is that we're no longer waiting for the money to come in. This money is coming in now. And with it, we will be able to continue to address the opioid epidemic throughout the entire state. I firmly believe that we as Nevadans are stronger together, and at my direction, that's the reason why my team met with each of the counties and litigating cities in this state. Representatives from many of those counties and cities are standing here with me, as I've indicated, and we're united as one in a commitment to stamp out the death grip that opioids has on this state. I'm proud, so proud of Nevada and our local leaders who set aside differences, set aside politics, set aside agendas, and came together to create an agreement to fairly and equitably allocate opioid recoveries. We call that agreement the One Nevada Agreement on Allocation of Opioid Recoveries. The One Nevada Agreement is an intrastate allocation agreement with all Nevada counties and litigating cities. It provides a mechanism to allocate recoveries and opioid settlements and bankruptcies between the state, counties, and litigating cities with one purpose in mind, and that purpose is to remediate harms, risks, and impacts of opioids. With this agreement, I can proudly say that we've built a trusting relationship between our state and our local governments. This relationship has united us in this area, and it will provide us the means for the Silver State to continue to win these battles, and I keep referring to them as battles because they're small battles in a bigger war in this opioid epidemic. But we won't stop until we have won the war. This past session, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 390, and this bill created a transparent and equitable mechanism based upon evidence-based principles to use the recoveries to abate the opioid epidemic. These principles are simple and they overlap with one another. They require that money be spent to save lives, that we use evidence to guide spending, that we invest in youth prevention, that we focus on racial equity, and that we develop a fair and transparent process for deciding when to spend the funding. Senate Bill 390 requires the State Department of Health and Human Services to use these principles to build a statewide needs assessment. In short, this identifies the needs of every geographic part of the state on how to abate the epidemic. These needs can vary throughout the state. In order to do this, DHHS is required to use, among other things, the damages reports from the state's litigation, qualitative and quantitative data, evidence-based practices, community-based participatory research, or similar methods to conduct outreach to groups impacted by opioids. It must outreach to governmental agencies with impacted groups, such as public safety, corrections, courts, juvenile agencies, and so on. And through input and advice from advisory committees, including public, regional, local, and tribal agencies, as well as the committee which I chair, the Substance Use Response Working Group, the SURGE Committee. Senate Bill 390 then requires DHHS to fund these needs assessments through the state plan using this money that we've recovered, as well as future dollars. That state plan, as you will hear, will be formalized or near finalized at the end of April and rolled out further in May or June of this year. Speaking of the regional approach here, I want to highlight the fact that this first tranche of money that we're getting in, the $50 million, we anticipate to be used in regional approaches. Washoe County, the region itself, will receive $3.1 million, something that the region, those who are standing around here, will be able to utilize together to figure out a way to attack this issue. The Quad Cities will receive about $1.5 million with this initial tranche of monies. Elko and its area will receive around $600,000. And again, these are monies that are brought in with the intent and purpose on going directly to addressing the issue. And it comes at a perfect time, as April is the National Month of Hope. We've joined together and brought money in to give hope to the people of Nevada and to those who've suffered by the devastation and impact of this horrible epidemic. With this money, Nevada and its local governments can and will establish programs and services that are needed right now. Every day without these services is a day the problem continues to get worse. Again, while we have won battles, this war is not finished. The state's litigation continues with a trial date that is set for April 17th, 2023, which will be one of the first things I'm working on in my second term. We are open to settling with other defendants, let's be clear, but let's also make no mistake about it. We will bring to justice those who have caused harm to Nevada and its residents and those who acted as a root cause for this epidemic. I'm honored and privileged to stand here today with people from all areas of this state, all areas of this region, and that have been affected by the epidemic. And you should know that we are working together again to fight it together. This horrible epidemic has impacted too many members of our community, and we will continue to stand together and say enough is enough. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here and for listening, and we will take questions.
So, the money that's going to be used for damage reports, qualitative, quantitative, right, is coming out of this settlement fund, correct? Do you know what percentage or how much exactly it's going to cost to, this is how much damage we sustained during this epidemic. This is how we're gonna do youth prevention. This is how we're gonna do this, and this is how we're gonna do that. Do you know how much money that costs? Because from what you're telling me, that money to do your research and get it together with where you're gonna put this money comes out of the original settlement money.
Well, let me ensure that we're not conflating a couple of issues here. When I say that DHHS is charged with looking at the amount of damages that we claim, I mean through the litigation. We've claimed over $1 billion of litigation damages in the litigation that we are engaged in. And so they're able to base their plan on what we are estimating as damages that we would recover via settlement or via litigation. Now, I think what you're asking about is how much it's going to cost the state itself to develop a plan, which is different than what I was talking about. And in that regard, I'd be happy to the extent DHHS wants to come up to have that conversation to be able to answer that question for you.
Hi, thank you for your question. It's kind of a broad topic. We have been doing a lot of this work for the last several years using some of our STR and our state opioid response money. And so some of the data has already been pulled. We are going back and we are looking at some of that data. We have our Office of Analytics that's able to pull a lot of data for us. And so I can't give you an exact dollar amount of how much it costs to be able to pull together these needs assessments because a lot of the information has already been pulled for us.
So it's not something like we get all this money and 50% is gonna go to our needs assessments. It's nothing like that.
No.
Okay, I have some other questions.
Well, let's see if anyone else has any others before we receive any other questions from anyone else in the room.
I was wondering about the needs assessment and how we might determine where to put different kind of programs and things like that for people who might need it more in different areas.
I will offer a couple of preliminary remarks and then open it up back again to DHHS, who I think will be in a better position to answer that question as well. But what I can say is that the statute itself, SB 390, talks about the individuals who are supposed to be in the room. And we're not talking about ivory towers here, folks. We're not talking about folks who are speaking in theory. We're talking about folks who have been directly affected by the issues, whether it's the foster care system or whether it's those who are aggrieved by deaths in the opioid epidemic. My committee, the Surge Committee, has members on it who have been directly affected. And so we will be receiving information from them as we continue to determine what to recommend to GHHS relative to how these monies are going to be spent, where it's going to go. So those are preliminary remarks that I can offer in that regard, but I believe, again, Don may have some comments for you as well. And anyone else, if you want.
Yeah, anybody else?
I'm sorry. I can't.
No, you're fine. Can I just run through the timeline again for you? And then that might give you a little bit better of an idea of how we're going to be distributing the money. So DHHS is currently in the process of creating the needs assessment, which we've already talked about. That will be finalized in May. This identifies what programs and services are needed in each geographic region. This needs assessment will then be used to develop the state plan, which will prioritize the funding. Once the funding is prioritized, we will be going out we will be distributing funding announcements to the state, and then we're hoping to get all of the dollars out to the communities late summer, early fall. Does that help?
Thank you. Any other questions before I allow duplicates? Any others? Okay.
Additional defendants in this, in the litigation, I mean, who are they? Who do you guys need to settle with? Who's the-
There are about 55 other defendants in the litigation, and I will commend to you our website where we have the actual complaint on our website that lists all of the defendants. And I couldn't run 55 of them down for you.
Walgreens,
Yes,
individual
yes.
companies, et cetera. So would they all be in this April 17th, 2023? Would they all be, the 55 defendants would be there?
Unless they decide to settle.
Okay. And as far as the bankruptcy, the Purdue bankruptcy,
Mm-hmm.
I know that a federal judge wasn't buying it, threw the initial bankruptcy out. How does that impact
Yeah.
your monies?
Yeah, no, that's a good question and a fair question. And the bankruptcy scenario has confounded the calculations, so to speak. I have my colleague here, Mark Kruger, with me, who can augment what I'm about to say. But my current understanding of the bankruptcy procedure is that there were a handful of states that appealed the bankruptcy court's adoption of the plan, so to speak. And I'm using phraseology that probably should be used in terms of art, but in layman's terms, that's what happened there. They appealed that decision, and the appellate court agreed with them and sent it back to the district court for additional, or the bankruptcy court for additional conversation around what the settlement would look like. That additional conversation has resulted in what appears to be a new settlement that has now been objected to by several other attorneys general, not including Nevada, but several others attorneys general. And so that bankruptcy money is going to be on hold until that can be squared away and addressed. Mark, is there anything you want to add? All right. He said I was perfect. I'll take that.
So one last question. I was in the hearing several years ago when Judge Breslow had many of these pharmaceutical companies. It was a big hearing. And I talked to the attorney that was representing the state. And he talked about, and I want to get your comment on this. He talked about tobacco settlement money. He wasn't happy with the way the state went about it, and that he wanted to do the best for forget California, he wanted to do the best for Nevada. He wanted us to get compensated, all those things. And it sounds as if you're on the same page with that, right? You're not gonna, oh yeah, I'll hop in on this class action, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. I'm gonna get what we need and deserve in this state.
Well, that's exactly right. And proof positive of that fact is the $45 million we were able to get from McKinsey and Company, having withstood the pressure of 56 other attorneys general telling me I need to join the settlement. We did not. We did not on purpose, because again, we as a state understand that we are one of the hardest hits. Listen, this is not like we sued as a group of states Acme Company over a number of widgets that have been sold. And you can just divvy up how much damages you get by how many widgets went to particular states. That's not what this is. This is an opioid epidemic that has had long-term tentacles into our state, and figuring out the best way to calculate those damages vis-a-vis how much some other state was hurt, it has been a difficult task, to be sure. We have, when appropriate, in the bankruptcy context, for example, agreed to certain terms because bankruptcy is different. But when inappropriate, we do not. And we are unafraid to stand alone and press forward with, as you've indicated, the 55 others who are still in this litigation. We will bring them to justice if it means that we have to wait till April of 2023 for our trial date. I want to offer the mic to any of my colleagues who'd like to, if you have any comments you'd like to make.
Did a wonderful job. Yeah, you covered it. You covered it.
Any final questions? If not, I want to say thank you so much again, because this image here is an important one for you to understand. This is a unified battle, a unified war that we're in, and we are determined to work together as much as we can to ensure that we all benefit from the settlements that are going to come in, the resolutions from these litigations that are going to come in, and we thank you for your attention to these matters. So thank you so much, everybody.